I used to think cameras were for proof. In my line of work, a camera is a final arbiter who badged through the door, who touched the rack, whose hands were where they shouldn't be. But cameras don't care what they see. They don't gasp, they don't blink. They just leave you with a picture you'll have to live with. I'm Nathan, 34, SecOps. The person in a Phoenix office park who says, "Show me the logs," the way other people say, "Prove it." I monitor alerts that ping at 3 in the morning, tune detectors you never notice, and alphabetize risk by what burns fastest if you ignore it. Most days, my job is a grindstone that keeps panic dull. I go running at dawn when the air is only half oven, make coffee, thumb through RSS feeds, and drive the 40 minutes from our little townhouse near Arcadia down to the office off the 22 with a sun visor I've had since college. If there's a soundtrack to my life, it's the hum of an HVAC unit that hasn't failed yet. My wife is Rachel, 31, media coordinator for a local events company that thinks in hashtags and uplights. She has a knack for making chaos look choreographed. She can slide between a client who wants their logo bigger and a DJ who missed his cue like she was born with a run-of-show taped to her wrist. When we met at a friend's backyard barbecue in Tempe plastic cups sweating, the sky doing its pink gold phoenix thing. She spoke like every sentence had a smile in it even if you wouldn't call it one. The kind of person who can sell you on staying for one more round without using the word stay. We got married near Papago Park on a day the wind remembered it was supposed to be gentle. My brother Chase was my best man because that's what you do even if you still have the childhood ache of always being compared. He's 3 years younger, a bar manager who can turn a pour into a performance and who has never in his life asked a room for permission. Our mother has always loved him with a light that made other lights dim. Our father loves us both, I think, but he wears his love like an old work shirt. Useful, soft at the elbows, faded by time. If you want to understand our family in one scene, it's Thanksgiving in our parents' backyard in North Phoenix. Mom puts out 3 pies and points to Chase like he made the sun get here on time. Dad brings the folding chairs out of the garage in a stack and says nothing. I keep the grill at a steady medium heat because nobody else believes in steady. Rachel laughs at my dad's jokes even when they take too long to arrive, and Chase convinces my mother to try bourbon the way you introduce a dog to a pool. She makes a face and says she loves it because Chase handed it to her. When Rachel told me she was pregnant, her voice was the small kind of brave. We hadn't planned it. There were spreadsheets in my life that felt insulted by the lack of notice. We sat at the kitchen island one night with a Walgreens receipt, a test in the trash, and a peach-scented candle someone gave us for a housewarming that never matched any season. Rachel put her chin on her fists. "We'll figure it out," she said. "We always do. It should have made me feel like a team. It made me feel like I was the team." We told our parents at OHSO after a Saturday run. Mom squealed like a teenager and pulled the ultrasound picture toward her like it might give her a role to play. "Our little Chase as an uncle," she said. "Imagine that!" She touched Rachel's hair in a way that made me want to build a fence around my wife with my body. Dad did the math on napkins, talked car seats and roofs, and the particular strength of quiet men. He called me kiddo in a tone that made the ground under me feel less slippery. Chase clapped me on the back and ordered another round. I would like to tell you that everything that came after announced itself like a siren. The truth is, uglier and slower. It's a stitch that pulls and keeps pulling until the shirt in your hands is a pile of thread and you can't remember what it looked like when it still kept you warm. We had a plan. I warned my team at work that I might need to bail on a late-night maintenance window or two. Rachel told her boss she'd scale her load after the second trimester. We bought a second-hand crib from a couple in Chandler who cried when we loaded it into the back of my SUV. We put it in the middle of the living room and stared at it like it was a spaceship we could learn to fly if we read the manual enough times. The first crack was dumb. They always are. It was a receipt I found in the bottom of the gym bag Rachel keeps by the back door. A bar tab from a place in downtown Phoenix I knew because it's where my brother works, Thursdays and Saturdays. 2 cucumber martinis, 1 old-fashioned, and a burger with bacon jam. The timestamp sat in the corner like a dare, 12,057 a.m., a Thursday night. You went out after your event? I asked, later, folding laundry on the couch like a normal person in a normal life. We always grab a bite, she said. You know how the crew gets after teardown. I was starving! Her face was open. It's how she tells stories. It makes them easier to carry. With who? I said. Not because I needed the names, but because developers taught me to look for the field that comes empty too often. She frowned like I'd rearranged the kitchen drawers. My team, she said. The usuals. Jen, Marco, a client's handler. Why? Nothing, I said, which was a half-truth. The other half was a picture. My brother's bar, my wife's receipt, a line drawn in my head like a child's crayon across a map. It's embarrassing to admit how long it took me to say the simplest thing. I didn't like it. We had agreed to fewer late nights. She rolled her eyes at the word agreed and said things didn't always fit into boxes. I said if you never try, of course they don't. She went quiet in the way that turns a room into the waiting area in a hospital. We slept facing different walls. In the morning, she kissed me like she wanted to be the person who kissed me and had forgotten how. After that, there were more receipts. A rideshare at 2023 a.m. from a street I could draw with my eyes closed because I used to skateboard there when the city felt like mine. A hotel bar charge that hit our joint card on a Tuesday because the client's boss wanted to thank the team and, no, Nathan, we couldn't say no. An Instagram story with a boomerang from a rooftop, her hair strobe, lit by a light I wasn't under, a song I learned to hate. None of it was a siren. All of it was a hum. I turned down the volume the way you do to get through a meeting. I put a nest. Hello at our door under the banner of safety, because safety is the one banner nobody makes you fold up. We live in a townhouse complex where porches echo and kids on scooters become somebody else's kids by the end of the block. Packages go missing. People have opinions about fences. Cameras make honest neighbors, and honest neighbors make good fences, my dad likes to say. And I told myself I was doing what any future father would do. But here's the thing about cameras. When you add them to a life, you inherit the duty to look. I started noticing Rachel's pattern. The nights that claimed networking, the mornings that performed exhaustion, the wedge of time between her text that said, leaving now, and the doorbell snapshot that confirmed her keyring in our lock. 15 minutes, 30, 42. Construction on the 51 was murder, she'd say, dropping her bag, kicking off her shoes, lit by the foyer light that makes everyone photogenic. I'd nod and kiss her and make a mental note that ADOD's official Twitter never reported a lane closure. A petty thing, a stupid thing, a man's brain bleeding into his heart through the capillaries named Maybe There's Nothing Here. There was one night in late spring when the sky went from cobalt to cotton in 10 minutes, and the heat you could chew softened into something you could breathe. I grilled chicken. Rachel set the table with the mismatched plates. She says, give meals, a story. We ate and talked about paint colors for the nursery, like you can paint a future, the color of a thing you recognize. After, she rolled out her yoga mat on the living room rug and did a slow video of prenatal poses, the kind with a woman in a calm room telling you to send your breath to your hips. The mat was black with a neon green strap we bought at Target. She rested on her side afterward with her hand on her stomach, and the look on her face made me forgive every median strip I'd screamed at alone in the car. I didn't plant the AirTag out of malice. I want that on the record. Security professionals lie for a living when we say, trust me, so I won't. I'll tell you that I slid the little white disc into the seam of that neon strap because if her car broke down or a stranger followed her to a garage or 1,000 other scenarios I'm paid to imagine happened, I could find her. We'd agreed to share locations. She'd turned hers off once in a traffic fight and apologized a day later. We'd recovered from that. I rested the disc in the strap, closed the Velcro like I was tucking in a baby bird, and told myself I was a responsible husband, which is the kind of sentence that ages poorly. Find My is clinical. It doesn't care about your story. It stamps a dot onto a map and says, "Here." The first time I checked, it was at our address. Of course it was. The second time was a week later on a Thursday. The dot wasn't at her gym like she'd said in a text. It wasn't even in the direction of it. It sat, patient as a family dog, 2 blocks from a place I knew too well, my brother's apartment off McDowell, where the view is a chevron sign and the sounds are a fountain that never worked, and a neighbor who argues with her boyfriend in the open because she wants witnesses. I closed the app so hard I thought I'd cracked something. My hands shook. I told myself she'd left the mat in her trunk and parked in the wrong structure. I told myself the dot had drifted. I told myself a range of things. Men who collect logs tell themselves when the log in their chest reads a line they don't want to accept. "You didn't go to the gym," I said that night, because subtlety is a privilege, and mine had expired. She blinked. "You're tracking me now?" "We track each other," I said. "You asked me to turn you on the year we had that thing at the art walk." "That was different," she said. "There was a creep. I turned mine back on the next day." "You didn't," I said, and the way her mouth hardened told me she knew the last time we'd talked about this wasn't the last time it had been a problem. She started to cry and then decided not to. "I stopped for a smoothie near Chase's," she said. "You know the place. They do the acai with the granola you like." He texted. He had a break. I said hi. "Are we not allowed to be a family anymore?" "Of course we are," I said too quickly, like speed could substitute for truth. "Of course. You just what?" "I just want to know," I said, because I couldn't say I wanted not to know. She shook her head and went to bed without the lights. The kitchen smelled like grilled chicken and a thing rotting under it I could not name. At work the next morning, my boss asked me to review a vendor's claims about AI-powered threat intel, which is what sales guys say when they want to charge you for a dashboard that animates dots. I stared at the brochure until the dots became a city grid in my head and my brother's street lit up in the corner like an alert. I excused myself, took a walk around the building past 3 Palo Verde trees that still think it's April, and called my father. "How's your mother?" he asked, which is what he says when he's trying to be funny and gentle at the same time. "Still starring in the Church of Chase," I said, then felt mean, then took it back. "Sorry. How are you?" "Old," he said, amused. "What's wrong?" I said it and didn't, which is how sons talk to fathers they respect but don't want to worry. He listened like he was remembering a manual nobody's printed in 30 years. "The thing about knowing," he said finally, "is once you do, you don't get to unknow. Be ready for that." On a Friday, Rachel forwarded me a confirmation for a content workshop in Tucson. 2 nights. There would be panels, a brunch that used the word curated, and a rooftop mixer with a drone photographer. The email hit our joint travel folder because we try to be the kind of couple that files things. I stared at the dates. I opened Chase's bar schedule on their Instagram. Thursdays and Saturdays he's on the floor, but sometimes they shift him to cover a local NASCAR weekend or a festival crowd. That weekend, the bar's story had a flyer, "Chase behind the stick, Fry sat." Are you ready? The kind of exclamation point that makes my teeth hurt. I made a spreadsheet. I'm not proud of it. I cross-tabbed the workshop sessions with Chase's hours because if you're going to be insane, be thorough. I included Nest hello timestamps of Rachel leaving the house and arriving home from the 2 previous client dinners and stacked them next to a Suntran bus schedule because I wanted to pretend this was about commuting realities. It wasn't. I printed the sheet, put it in a folder I labeled Insurance, because words are shields if you point them the right way, and hid it in the drawer where we keep warranties for appliances we don't own anymore. When she packed, I held the yoga mat strap in my hand like an artifact and considered telling her I'd put an AirTag in it. For safety, I could say, honest in one way and a coward in 10. I clasped the Velcro and slid it in the trunk with her suitcase and said, "Text me when you get there." She kissed my cheek and said, "I always do." If you've never watched a dot move over I-10 like a beetle in a box, I don't recommend it. It will teach you that knowing is not the relief you imagine. Find my updated every few minutes. The dot stopped at Picacho Peak because everybody stops there. It paused at a gas station where the only thing you can buy that won't make you feel worse is water. Then it settled over a downtown Tucson hotel that brands itself as boutique and new and wears both badly. She texted a photo of an empty conference room with folding chairs and pink uplighting and said, "Wish you were here," which I do not believe she meant in any way beyond the way people use that line, because a line is a bridge, and bridges feel good. She called at 11 from the hotel bathroom. I could hear the white hiss of the fan and the echo you only get from tile. "It's actually good," she said. The keynote was a little influencer church, but the session on nonprofit branding made me feel like my brain is not only confetti. I told her about a client who insisted on using the word synergy, and she laughed, and for a minute, we were the kind of married I remember telling people we would. BB. I slept. At 2019 a.m., I woke the way you wake when your name is on a screen in your dream and you recognize your own handwriting. I checked the app. The dot was not at the hotel. It was 3 blocks over in an apartment tower I knew because a friend from college lived there for a year and called it the aquarium. The bar on the ground floor posts pictures of cocktails you pose with, and the pool is shaped like a bad decision. I watched the dot stutter as the network caught up. It settled. It stayed. I lay on my back in the dark and felt the house hold itself around me like a secret. The ceiling fan made its soft clicking noise, which is 2/4 turns away from meeting a ladder, and 10 minutes I couldn't give it. I stared at the outline of the crib in the living room through the open bedroom door and realized I was using the word crib in my head to make this all real. It did not help. "Hey," I texted. "You okay?" The dots on my screen suggested words were being typed, and then they stopped, and then an hour later a message landed. "Sorry. Marco's cousin knows someone in the building." After party turned into one of those weird industry hangs with a piano, and a woman who's better than the room deserves. Bed now. "Glad you had fun," I wrote. The sentence had the weight of dry leaves. I set the phone on the nightstand and watched the halo of its notification light until it timed out. The dot on the second phone I keep for things that require clean separation remained where it was until 4007 a.m., then returned to the hotel. No siren, just a hum. There is a superstitious part of me that believes in the monsoon as an answer. Phoenix is a promise of heat for 9 months and punishment for 3. Then, one day in July or August, a wall of dust sweeps in from the east like a living thing, and the air goes green, and you can smell the water the way you smell a memory. Rain slams asphalt. The city exhales. People run outside and film the sky like it won't do this again. It always does. The day Rachel came home from Tucson, the air felt like that. Like something was going to break, and the world would pretend it had always been this wet. She was sunburned in a way that didn't come from conference rooms. She threw her bag down and hugged me so long, I had to invent a reason to pull back. "I missed you," she said into my shirt. "Me too," I said, and have never told a truth with more fractions. We lasted a week before the next fracture. My mother called and asked us to come by Sunday for burgers and to help Dad move a shelving unit he pretended he didn't need help with. I said yes before checking with Rachel, because that's how you avoid arguments you will lose. Later I told Rachel I'd accepted and she said she'd planned to go to a yoga class and then help Jen with a content shoot for a spa in Scottsdale because they're comping the facial and I look like I haven't slept since February. You can go after, I said, and the discussion degraded into the kind of accounting where every hour you offer feels like an accusation. Sunday came anyway. At my parents', my mother made a big show of Rachel's belly even though there was barely anything to show, and my father winked at me over the grill with a look that said he remembered what this felt like and it would be okay in ways he couldn't name. Chase arrived late with a bag of buns and a story about a bachelorette party that tipped in singles and trauma. He kissed Rachel's cheek in a way that fell 1 degree outside what I wanted from the world. "Still doing that fancy yoga?" my mother asked Rachel. "You always glow after." "It's not fancy," Rachel said. "It's breathing with choreography." "Breathing," Mom said, amused like she'd invented oxygen. "Maybe I should try it." She glanced at me. "It might help with that frown." "Maybe bourbon would," Chase said. Mom laughed like he'd invented humor. After burgers, my father and I moved the shelf. Rachel lay on the couch and scrolled. Mom and Chase did something at the kitchen island that involved lime wedges and trust. When we left, my mother hugged me and whispered, "Don't get so serious, Nathan. Life's short." It was the kind of thing people say when they've never had to be serious to keep the roof on. The next day, I went to work and did something my job taught me that doesn't translate well to marriage, I compiled. I took the dots and the receipts and the nest clips and the hotel confirmation, and I built a timeline like I'd present to a client after a breach. I kept it plain. Dates, times, locations. I did not editorialize. I did not dramatize. I took the picture the camera had given me and arranged it so the shape was impossible to deny. I added a tab for potential alternative explanations and filled it with lies. I refused to call lies yet. The act of building the thing calmed my hands. It did not calm my heart. I told myself I'd confront her that night. I didn't. She came home tired and beautiful and full of a story about a woman at the spa who had spent $300 on a cream that apparently contained crushed pearls and hoped it would fix her marriage. "I wanted to tell her to spend the money on a therapist," Rachel said, kicking off her shoes. But then I remembered tips. We watched a show where families renovate houses in 30 minutes and the editing pretended drywall was easy. In bed, she put her hand on my chest the way she used to when my heartbeat meant more than habit. I stared at the ceiling fan and did not speak. A week later, the doctor mentioned blood types. It was a routine thing in a routine appointment. Rachel is A positive. I am O negative. The doctor talked about Roche factors and shots and the sort of chemistry that most couples never think about until an ultrasound tech turns a screen toward you and says, "There's the head," in a tone that implies a story worth telling your parents. The math didn't punch me. It pinched. Between the types, there was nothing impossible, only a set of rules that could be shuffled in too many ways. Still, when the nurse left us alone, my wife squeezed my fingers and said, "See? Science says this is fine." The way she said science made me feel like I'd been accused of not believing in it. That night, I stayed at the office until the lights went to occupancy sensors and the building thought it was empty. Phoenix looks different at 11 p.m. from an office park. Flat and glittery like a lie you can't prove is a lie from far away. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the red glow of the exit sign until it blurred. My team Slack was dead. The IDS hummed its quiet song. I opened my timeline again like a man pressing a bruise to see if it still hurts. It did. I added one more line. Saturday, 1000 a.m. Nest? Saturday, 1021 a.m. Text from Chase. You up? It could have been for me. It wasn't. I never go to bed without Do Not Disturb after midnight. There is a moment when compiling stops being a way to calm yourself and starts being a way to prepare for war. I don't recommend it as a threshold to cross without someone to call you back. I didn't have someone, so I crossed it. I told my parents I wanted a family dinner. Not Thanksgiving big, not birthday cake, just us. Mom asked what we were celebrating, and I said the baby. She said every day is a celebration when new life is here, which is something people say when they want a reason to open a bottle. Dad asked if I needed him to fix the TV in the backyard, and I said no, I'd bring my own thing. He said okay in a tone that meant he didn't want to know more. The day of the dinner, I went for a run on the canal path before the heat took the sky hostage. I ran past willow trees and a heron that has decided Phoenix is where he wants to live out his days. I thought about my brother and the way my mother looks at him like he is the last song in a show she loved. I thought about the time he broke my skateboard and lied about it, and Mom blamed the dog, and the way my father made him mow 2 lawns as if that could fix anything at the root. I thought about Rachel's hand on her belly and the way hope is a foolish, expensive habit, and the only one I ever liked. At home, I showered and shaved like I was going to a job interview. I packed a small bag with a power strip, an HDMI cable, and a streaming stick that turns any TV into a screen that listens to your phone. I loaded my timeline onto my phone photos with a folder name that wouldn't set off alarms. The folder was called House Paint Ideas, which is the sort of lie you construct when you think you might still have a self in the aftermath. I drove to my parents' house with the AC blasting and the radio turned off because my head was noisy enough. The sky to the west was doing that monsoon drama again, giant anvils of cloud distorting the edges of the city. When I pulled up, Dad was in the driveway trying to fix an oscillating fan that had stopped oscillating circa 2009. He waved the screwdriver like a wand and told me to tell my mother he had it under control. I kissed his cheek, which we pretend is a new ritual, and went inside. Mom had set the backyard like a set designer who only has one show, but does it well. The strings of lights, the red plastic cups, the bowl of chips that never empties. Rachel was at the island cutting limes into too thin wedges because she believes in aesthetics more than physics. She looked at me with a smile that didn't stick and said, "Hey." And I said, "Hey." And the air between us went to static. Chase arrived 20 minutes late with a 6-pack of a local beer that uses a saguaro on the can and sells for $2 more because of it. He hugged Rachel like he was auditioning for someone's attention. He hugged me like he remembered we used to share a room that smelled like sweat and Doritos and plans. "What's with the briefcase, counselor?" he said, nodding at my bag. "Work habit," I said. "I brought a thing to show Dad later. He's trying to decide whether to upgrade the router." That part was true. Dad's Wi-Fi is a maze built in 2012 that refuses to collapse. We ate. We did the ritual conversation where Dad tells a story about a guy at the shop who thinks QR codes steal your identity, and Mom tells a story about a neighbor who put gravel in his yard because he thinks lawns are communism. Rachel did her bit about the client who wanted to know if their event could have a theme that was blue, and Mom laughed like she was at a show where someone who knows exactly how to be charming is earning tips. Chase told a story about a coworker who got caught sneaking a flask and how he saved the night with something called a scorpion shot that I suspect was illegal even when I was 22. Each time Chase gestured, Mom's eyes followed like there was a string tied between them. I rose to clear plates and felt Rachel's hand on my back like a warning or a wish. "Can we not do whatever it is you're planning?" she said in a voice only I could hear. "What do you think I'm planning?" I asked, and the way she looked down told me more about what she'd been thinking about than anything in my timeline. "I don't know," she said. "Something with a screen." She tried to laugh. It fell flat on the tile. I carried the plates to the sink and turned on the water. The first dish fogged the air, and my glasses in one dumb move. When I turned back, my father stood by the sliding door, hands in his pockets, looking at me the way men who love you look when they know you're going to choose pain on purpose. "You still want to show me that router thing?" he asked. His voice was neutral. He is good at neutral. "In a minute," I said. He nodded and slid the door open and let the night in. The storm had hung back, as if it wanted to see what we would do before it decided whether to drench us. When we were all outside, I plugged the streaming stick into the back of the TV under the eaves that my mother calls the cabana, even though it is just a slab and a hope. The stick found my phone like it had wanted to know me all its life. The cast icon glowed. My thumb hovered over it, and for a moment, I saw a path where I just played a video about paint finishes and asked Dad whether he preferred eggshell or satin for high-traffic areas. It would be a kind of mercy. It would also be a lie that required performance forever. Rachel stood next to me, fingers laced over her stomach like she was praying for a version of me I had already outgrown. Chase cracked another beer. Mom told him he'd get fat like his uncle used to be, and he laughed and kissed her head. Dad sat in his chair and achieved stillness. I tapped the cast icon. My phone asked where. I chose Backyard TV. The screen blinked from live sports to the album of our life, a grid of thumbnails, vacations, a half-assembled crib, a screenshot of an email confirming a hotel in Tucson, a map with dots that might be anywhere if you had never lived here. In the top row, the folder labeled House Paint Ideas waited like a joke only I knew. I opened it. I thought for a second I could hear the heavy quiet of a cooling engine and then realized it was my own blood. The first image filled the screen. A nest. Hello capture of Rachel at our door at 1000 a.m. Her keys in her left hand, hair pulled up, the kind of face a woman wears when the night has not been what she told herself it would be. The timestamp sat bottom right, white on black. No siren. Just the hum of the lights my mother had strung the week Chase turned 21 because he said, "Parties require the right glow." "What is this?" my mother asked, not curious so much as irritated. She hates slow stories. "A timeline," I said. My voice sounded like someone had stolen the parts of it that say anger and left me with the pieces labeled tired. "Nate," Rachel said. She touched my arm. "Please." "Keep going," Dad said softly, which is odd because he is not the keep-going type when it comes to bleeding in public. I looked at him and saw his jaw, the way it set. He had mowed 2 lawns for Chase once. It had not fixed the break. He knew that. He also knew a man gets to choose whether he speaks the truth in front of witnesses or swallows it in his own kitchen until it poisons him. The next slide was a map. A dot near McDowell and 7th. The little circle of signal around it like a halo if you were feeling generous. I did not. The slide after was a hotel confirmation. Then, a photo Rachel had texted me from that rooftop with the caption, "Wish you were here," lying like confetti. Then, Chase's bar's Instagram post with the hours he'd bragged about covering, and the timestamp that made it a lattice you could climb even if you didn't want to. Chase shifted, beer bottle against his knee. "Dude," he said, "what are you doing?" "Showing Mom the router," I said. I could feel my mouth do a shape that wasn't a smile. "This is inappropriate," my mother said. The word snapped. "You always were dramatic, Nathan. We don't need to turn a family dinner into your program." "He's humiliating her," Chase said, as if humiliation were a thing you pick up and throw. "I'm telling the truth," I said. "In order. Like, we all agreed stories should go." "We didn't agree to this," Rachel said. She was crying now, not the kind that performs. The kind the body does when a wall gives. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. It hung there between us like a rope that had already frayed. Dad shifted in his chair. "Let him finish," he said to my mother. "Finish what?" she said. "This performance?" She looked at Chase like she needed him to jump in and stop the music. "The part where the cameras make their picture," I said, "and we decide whether we blink." I swiped to the next image. A screenshot of "Find my" with the yoga mat icon camped near Chase's building at 2 in the morning. Another map, another night. A video from the nest, with Rachel leaving our house in gym clothes and returning 3 hours later with hair that had been brushed by a hand that wasn't my metaphor. Chase stood. The chair scraped the concrete like someone pushing a metal bin across a warehouse. "Turn it off," he said. "Why?" I asked. "You don't like the color?" "You're sick," he said. He stepped toward me with the look he gets when a guy at the bar pretends a tip is a favor. Who does this? Who makes PowerPoints of their wife? The word wife landed like a book at the end of a shelf. Rachel made a sound like air leaving a pool toy. My mother's mouth was a line. Dad stared at the screen as if a test pattern had replaced his yard. I could have stopped there. The next folder in my phone held the Tucson Hotel's security cam image of a lobby. Nobody posted online, because lobbies are boring. It also held a PDF of credit card charges you could explain if you wanted to live in a world where everything is explainable forever. The last thing in the folder was a text thread I'd been sent by someone who wanted me to see what I'd been refusing to see. I could have tapped it and let my parents read a line they'd never unread. Instead, I put my phone down on the table. The screen was still mirroring, my thumbnails enormous on the backyard TV, our faces lit by our own life, as if the media department had planned an activation called The Truth. "Rachel," I said, "do you want to tell them, or do you want me to keep going?" Her shoulders shook. She shook her head. She looked at me the way a person looks at a doctor who gives you a diagnosis you suspected and still want to argue with. She opened her mouth and closed it, and then she said, "Quiet, I'm sorry." And that was when my mother stood and slapped her hand on the table. "We don't do this," she said. "This is not how we do this." "Maybe it's how we should," my father said. He did not raise his voice. He doesn't have to. It carries because it doesn't try to. Chase laughed, the laugh that made girls nod in college. "Dad," he said, like he could reset the board by invoking the rules. Dad didn't look at him. He looked at me. He nodded, once. The nod meant, if you step into this river, you will be carried where it goes. The nod also meant, it's time. I picked up my phone. The text thread that would end our house as a house waited under my thumb. The first line visible without opening the bubble was my brother's name, and a sentence I would have paid any amount of money never to have read. "You make me feel like who I was before." I tapped. The messages filled the screen, and the air went heavy like the sky before the rain finally decides to do what it promised. The first one is from him. It isn't even a sexy line. It's not a picture. It's just Chase, my younger brother, typing to my wife at 12,041 a.m. "You make me feel like who I was before." Before what? Before me. Before adulthood. Before responsibility. Before the part where you look in a mirror and admit the person looking back will have to live with what you do next. Rachel's reply is worse because it isn't fireworks, it's infrastructure. It's easy with you. I don't have to explain my day. I don't have to be the one who keeps it together. With him, I'm always the checklist. With you, I can miss a step and the world doesn't fall. With him is me. The sentence lands like a brick through glass. There are more messages. Practical arrangements dressed up in half jokes. I'll say, "I'm stopping for gas." Your shift ends at 1, but you can cut early if Troy takes last call. If I leave the mat in the trunk, the dot will sit where I park on 7th. Do you think he notices the mat? He notices everything, Rachel. He's built like that. I'm not. Then guilt stitched through with a thread of thrill. We shouldn't. We said we wouldn't. And yet I'm happy in a way I don't understand. My mother makes the first sound. It's a sharp inhale, a little stage cue. She looks at Rachel like a teacher catching a favorite student cheating and already preparing the excuse. "They're texting," she says. "People text. It doesn't mean..." "It means exactly what you think it means," my father says, not taking his eyes off the screen. He doesn't sound surprised. He sounds like a man looking at a dent in a truck he always knew would appear. Chase steps toward me, hand out, not a fist, but not open either. "Turn it off," he says again. "We can talk. We'll talk. You don't do this to family. You did this to family, I say. My voice is so even it unnerves me. All I've done is put the camera where you both kept saying there wasn't one. Rachel is crying openly now. Nathan, she says, please, not with your parents, please. You chose my parents the second you chose my brother, I say. I don't raise my voice. I don't need to. The TV glow is the loudest thing here. My mother advances 2 steps like she can block a hurricane. Stop it. You always make everything a federal case. She's pregnant. She's tired. Your brother is lonely. You're being cruel. My father stands up. He doesn't do it quickly. He doesn't need to do anything quickly to be heard. Lynn, he says to my mother, using her name in the way that says this next part will not bend. Sit down. She does, because she knows the tone. We all do. It's the tone that made 2 feral boys put their baseball bats down and clean up a yard once. No questions. Rachel, Dad says, still watching the screen, is there anything we're seeing that isn't true? Rachel doesn't answer right away. She wipes her face. She stares at the concrete under her feet like it's a line she can still decide not to cross. Then she says, very quietly, no. Chase breathes out a sound like a laugh, except it isn't. It's the noise someone makes when the chair they're on breaks and they pretend they meant to stand. Okay, my father says. He looks at me. What do you want to do, son? The word son doesn't sting. It steadies. I didn't expect that. For tonight, I say, I want this on the record. For after, I want a paternity test and a lawyer. My mother's head snaps up. A what? Mom, I say. We talked about blood types at the appointment. It's not definitive. I know that. But I'm done moving forward assuming the best while the worst is happening in group chat. She looks at Rachel. Not at me. Not at her favorite. She looks at Rachel with hurt, but not the right kind. Not because Rachel betrayed me. Because Rachel dragged Chase somewhere my mother can't spin into a good story. This is disgusting, she says. You would make her go through that stress. The baby? The baby deserves the truth, my father says. We all do. We stand there in the courtyard under the sagging lights, the television gasping between frames in the heat, our family's heartbeat on pause. Then the sky finally decides to keep its promise and the rain starts. Not a sprinkle, a sheet. My mother squeals and rushes to pull the cushions off the chairs. The TV flickers and dies with a pitiful little click. My father unplugs the streaming stick and hands it to me like you would hand back a tool someone borrowed to finally fix the leak. Inside, we separate into corners like fighters. My mother fusses with towels and pretends dishes require urgent attention at 9,040 p.m. My brother leans on the island and looks at the sink as if it might volunteer a way out. Rachel stands by the sliding glass door and watches the rain like a person at an airport window watching a plane that will not land in time. My father puts his hand on my shoulder. Let me drive her home, he says quietly, nodding at Rachel. Not him. Not you. Me. Rachel hears and turns. I can drive myself. I didn't ask, Dad says. There is no meanness in it, only boundary. Keys. She hands them over like she has done it before, maybe with her father, maybe never with a man who meant it. They leave. My mother waits until she hears Dad's truck reverse into the rain-slapped street, and then she turns to me, eyes bright with something I haven't seen since she found my 7th grade report card with 3 missing assignments. You did this, she says. With your suspicion, with your cameras and your lists, you smother. You always have. You take the air out of a room, and then you complain you can't breathe. I take a breath. I let it out. Mom, I say, he's my brother. And he's mine, she says. He's mine, and I know his heart. Chase watches this without speaking. For half a second our eyes meet and I see it. The old us. The kids who built forts out of moving boxes when Dad still had hair and Mom still believed in chore charts. Then the moment passes. He looks away first. He always did. I'm sorry, he says, and for the first time it almost sounds like he means it. I didn't set out to. It just happened. I finish for him, because men like us use that word like a shield when what we mean is, I wanted what I wanted and hoped gravity wouldn't apply to me. It happened inside your choices. Maybe that's too sharp. Maybe it isn't. He flinches anyway. I'm getting a test, I say. If it's mine, then I will be there for the child. If it isn't, I will not be there for your mess. Those are the rules I can live with. He nods like he understands. I think he only understands the first half. The next week is paperwork and quiet. Rachel sleeps in the guest room. We arrive and leave like we work opposite shifts. When we cross, we behave like parents of a feverish toddler, voices low and edged with the tiredness honesty can't cure. She agrees to the test because she has run out of ways to say, trust me, that don't sound like a dare. Arizona doesn't care about how you feel when you submit DNA. It just wants your cheeks swabbed and your forms filled. The clinic is cold on purpose and humming with machines that make you think of certainty, and certainty is a drug. Rachel sits across from me with her palms on her knees and her hair in a loose ponytail. She looks very young. A tech explains chain of custody without knowing I could give the lecture with my eyes closed. I let them do the swab on me, and then hers, and then a second on me because redundancy is romance in my field. In the car afterward, she says, I'm sorry, in a flat voice. I say, I know, in the same tone, and neither of us specifies for what. My lawyer is the kind of woman who uses the phrase, let's take the temperature down, like she's switching off a stove. I tell her I want a dissolution as soon as humanly possible and no spousal maintenance. Arizona doesn't formally punish adultery with money, she says, already flicking through tabs. But given that we have a pregnancy with probable non-paternity, that changes spousal dynamics, and if we can get a consent decree with no maintenance, that's the cleanest path. Are you expecting to fight over property? We rent, I say. The most expensive thing we own together is an espresso machine. Then we won't make a mountain out of a mocha pot, she says, and I almost laugh. My father calls every other day and doesn't ask questions he doesn't need the answers to. My mother does not call. She texts me once, you are breaking this family. I type and erase 10 responses. I settle on one, it was already broken, Mom. I just stopped taping it together in the dark. She does not reply. The results come back on a Wednesday that behaves like a Tuesday. I open the envelope because Rachel can't. The words are simple. Probability of paternity, 0%. The graph is neat and sterile, an array that says the math always wins if you let it. I sit on the edge of our bed holding the paper, and I expect to feel the floor fall away like an elevator gone wrong. Instead, I feel something uncoil in my chest. I hadn't realized was knotted. Relief is ugly in moments like this. It looks like cowardice if you photograph it. It feels like oxygen. Rachel comes to the doorway and sees my face and knows. She sits next to me without touching. I was going to tell you, she says, and I believe her. Eventually. Maybe when the baby had my dad's eyes and that was suddenly complicated. Chase knows, I say. It's not a question. She nods and covers her stomach. He says he'll figure it out. Has he ever? I ask. It's mean. I don't care. We move. Not in with other people. Not yet. She moves first, into a short-term place with monochrome furniture that tries to look clean and ends up looking temporary. I stay, because landlords prefer boring names on checks. I pack her things with care, because I have decided my last gift to this marriage will be not trashing what's left of it. She takes the plants and the gold-rimmed glasses and the framed posters we argued were tacky the day we found them and I pretended to lose. I meet Chase twice. Once outside the bar before his shift, once at a coffee shop we used to joke was for people who buy leather coasters. The first time, he tries charm like a wrench on a bolt that has rusted in place. The second time, he tries apology. Neither fits. Between those meetings, my father meets with his attorney. It happens quietly. Dad signs papers. He tells no one. My mother finds out when a letter arrives from the guy who has cut their hair since I was 5 and now wears suits to tell people what the state will think of their wishes. The will is updated. The house, the shop, the savings account, whose balance I never asked about because I grew up with a roof and that felt like wealth. The little lot they bought near Payson because my mother once thought she'd like a cabin. All of it goes to me. To Chase, the will leaves $1. The dollar is not about money. It is about the clarity leaving a will with someone's name and a zero can't provide. A dollar says, "We thought of you and decided." I don't find out by letter. Dad tells me himself in the garage, the smell of oil and cut wood around us like it always is. He taps the folder once like a judge. "I'm not punishing your brother," he says. "I'm rewarding you for being the kind of man who puts his shoulders under the roof even when nobody claps. If he becomes that man someday, he'll be fine. If he doesn't, a windfall won't fix it." "Mom will never forgive you," I say. "Then she won't," he says, and his face does that thing where it looks like the desert when the rain stops, scrubby and clear. I don't gloat. I also don't argue. I go home and I sit in the living room among the spaces where things used to be, and I breathe until it doesn't hurt to breathe. The divorce is less dramatic than TV promised. It is forms. It is signatures. It is me learning that words like decree and stipulation can be little life rafts if you let them. My lawyer slides a draft across the table. No spousal maintenance, no claim on my retirement accounts, division of the security deposit proportional to the damage that will be documented by walkthrough. She's good at this. Rachel doesn't fight. Maybe she knows she doesn't get to. Maybe she's too tired to. We both initial and initial and initial again until the pen feels heavy. On the day the court clerk stamps the packet, my phone buzzes with an email from Gmail's travel folder because I forgot to turn off a label rule. It is a receipt from a resort in Sedona booked with Chase's employee discount and Rachel's address. My name is not on it. It shouldn't be, and yet something small inside me shrugs. The part that used to imagine a version of us that gets a cabin and paints it a color that looks like hope is finally done with its little theater. The baby comes in late winter, in a hospital room where everything is beige and kind. I am not there. I wouldn't be. Rachel sends a photo anyway after, of a small red face with a knitted cap and a mouth that is not mine and is also not mine, because babies haven't chosen their angles yet. "She's here," the text says. "Healthy." I stare at the image for a long time and then I reply, "I hope she never has to learn how to sleep with the camera watching. I mean it kindly. It probably reads like something else." She doesn't respond. I don't see my mother for months. When we finally do speak, it's in her kitchen, both of us pretending the stew deserves our full attention. She looks older. She looks like someone who tried to airbrush a picture and ended up making the subject look like a mannequin. "You don't have to hate him," she says, not looking at me. "I don't," I say. "I just don't have to save him." "I raised you both," she says, as if that explains the math. Maybe it does. Maybe it's the whole problem. I drive home from that conversation past the lot in our neighborhood, where a new development is going up. The sign shows a family in sweatshirts smiling beside a fake cactus. The kind of stock photo that underestimates how acutely people remember their own kitchen. That night, I open my laptop and I look at houses. Not fancy, not empty. Something with a yard where a dog would think it had lucked out. A place that doesn't share walls. A place where I won't hear other people's arguments through drywall and wonder if that's the frequency my mother loved best. I find it in a suburb I used to make fun of because the HOA newsletters read like dispatches from a dictatorship, and everyone puts up the same inflatable snowman in December. The house itself is boxy and honest. It has a citrus tree in the back that overpromises. The inspection report is straightforward. The price is a number I can explain to myself without lying. I make an offer. They accept. I sign. I move. The first night, It's so quiet, I think the AC died. Then I realize it's what quiet sounds like when your nervous system is not auditioning for disasters that aren't here anymore. I get a therapist because I've run out of podcasts I can pretend will replace the work of saying things out loud. The first session I talk for 50 minutes and say almost nothing. The second I say too much. The third I bring in the folder labeled insurance and set it on the side table like an organ. I am done carrying in my body. She doesn't look at it. She looks at me. Cameras tell you what happened, she says. They don't tell you what you wanted to happen. You're grieving that part. That's not the same as grieving the marriage. Don't confuse them. I start sleeping. Not every night. Enough. I run in the mornings, the canal path from this side longer and somehow kinder. I adopt a dog with a name the shelter gave him that he doesn't respond to. I rename him Cisco, and he decides quickly that I am his problem now, and he will solve me by sitting on my feet while I read. He sheds on my couch, and I don't care. He barks at the Nest doorbell at the new house until I disable motion alerts and delete 2 folders I don't need anymore. It feels like turning off a fire alarm in a room where nothing is actually on fire. Spring slips into summer, and the desert does its furnace routine, and my air conditioner becomes my most intimate relationship. Work is work. I get better at not letting my imagination spend money it didn't earn. My father comes over on Saturdays, and we fix things not because we have to, but because it's good to hold a tool and make it do what it was meant to do. He doesn't bring up wills. I don't bring up mothers. We talk about screws and the way the citrus tree refuses to admit it lives in clay. Chase calls, because of course he does. It's August, and the heat has turned everyone in Phoenix into the worst version of themselves. My phone buzzes while I'm on the floor teaching Cisco that the vacuum is not a predator. I let it go to voicemail. He calls again. I answer on the 3rd ring because I believe in finishing things even when you shouldn't. Hey, he says, and the word already carries a favor inside it. It's me. I noticed, I say. A long exhale. So, he says, things have been complicated. The bar cut shifts. We're slammed on weekends, but weekdays are... whatever. The point is, I'm behind. Landlord's being a hard ass. And with the baby, you know how it is. I don't, I say. I don't make it nice. I was thinking, he says, maybe you and I could meet up and talk. Like brothers. Maybe you could float me. Just a bridge. I'll pay you back. I don't want to go to Dad because you know how he gets. And Mom is. She's Mom. The quiet in my living room changes shape. It isn't heavy. It's something else. Cisco sighs and drops his head onto my foot like a paperweight. Chase, I say, and my voice does a thing I didn't rehearse. It softens without surrendering. I'm not that bridge for you. Not anymore. That's cold, he says immediately. Habit, not hurt. After everything. After growing up together. After the... You set the fire, I say. You don't also get to pick the evacuation route. He goes quiet long enough. I think he's hung up. Then he says, I thought you'd say that, and it sounds like a script he wrote for me and is annoyed I didn't ad-lib the lines he hoped for. I hope you figure it out, I say. Really? You're charming. You're smart. You just have to want boring things for a while. It's the only way I know that works. Boring, he says, the word like a slur. You and Dad always with that steady crap. Steady gets roofs replaced, I say. Steady gets car seats installed right. Steady gets sleep. He scoffs. You love sounding like a manual, he says, and then he hangs up before I can say the thing that's been sitting on my tongue for months. Someone had to. Rachel texts me occasionally, not about feelings, about logistics. There is mail. There is a box of winter clothes that went to the wrong place. There is a dentist who still insists on billing me for a cleaning she missed. Once, she sends a video of the baby taking 3 twitchy almost steps toward a couch. The baby squeals and falls and laughs at her own collapse. The sound goes through me in a way I do not consent to. I watch it twice, and then I delete it, because there is a version of me who will start threading together these small moments and hanging them on a string called maybe, and that version of me has already cost me enough sleep. I text back, "She has your laugh." Rachel replies, "I know, thank you. It isn't a truce. It's better. It's accurate." Months stack. The will sits somewhere in a safe and means nothing day to day, which is how legacies work when you don't treat them like lottery tickets. My mother hosts Thanksgiving, and I go because my father asks, and because Cisco now enjoys my parents' backyard. So much he whines when we pull into their driveway. Rachel does not come. Chase does. There is a seat for him. There will always be a seat. Families make that mistake as easily as they breathe. We eat pie. We talk about the weather like it owes us money. My mother sprinkles updates about the baby into conversation like glitter. You can't sweep up. She never says Chase's daughter. She never says Rachel's child. She says the baby, as if an article can make a situation neutral. When we leave, my father hugs me and says, "You good?" And I say, "I am," and marvel that I'm not lying. Sometimes I stand in my backyard at night and watch the block breathe. Somewhere, a TV laughs. Somewhere, a pool pump keeps a promise. The citrus tree does its stubborn thing in the corner, like a reminder that growth isn't flashy if you're doing it right. I think about the camera at my old place, the little round eye that faithfully recorded a door unlocking at 1 in the morning while I lay in bed and practiced forgiving something that hadn't stopped happening. Cameras don't blink, they don't judge, they don't edit. They hand you what is and make you decide how long you want to live in the house of denial. I'm not an optimist. I am, finally, a man who knows what he can put on his shoulders without snapping. Therapy taught me that my vigilance can be a skill when it's aimed at servers and a problem when it's aimed at love. The dog taught me that being needed in small, obvious ways is a kind of relief you don't have to earn. My father taught me that taking sides isn't cruelty when the ground itself has slid. My mother taught me that loyalty without reality curdles into something that feeds the worst in people. Rachel taught me that being good at producing other people's parties doesn't mean you know how to sit in the leftovers after everyone goes home. Chase taught me that a person who never learns to pay the bill will always assume someone else should. On a Tuesday in late fall, I switch off the last of the auto uploads on my phone. I clear an app. I silence a folder. I walk Cisco down to the path as the sky goes the pale blue that means the heat will be kind tomorrow. A woman jogs past us with a stroller. The baby inside laughs at a dog that isn't mine. I wave at a neighbor I've learned to like. I go home to a house that feels like mine because I have chosen to be the only story happening inside it. What do you think about how Nathan confronted the truth and handled the fallout? Would you have done the family reveal or kept it private? Tell me in the comments, and if this story kept you listening, hit like and subscribe so more people find it. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that cameras don't blink, but you still get to.